Jean, and we will get started.
Great. Bear with me 1 second while I navigate my
You're good.
monitors. All right.
Wonderful. Now I can see your lovely grid of faces. Hello, everybody. Let's let John in real quick before we get started. Thanks for being here. My name is Elise Bonarelli. I am the director at Vectorspace, which is a community makerspace in Lynchburg, Virginia. I have been working with a team of makerspace organizers around the state. So Jean Marshall is a board member at Nova Labs, and she is our chat moderator today. If you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat at any point, and Jean will make sure questions get answered or get asked at appropriate times, and we'll call on you when we're ready for those. If you want to share contact info, things like that in the chat, that's also great. Ryan Hall is a founding board member at Valley Makers Association in Winchester, Virginia. And Ryan is going to be introducing our speakers throughout the event. And then also Asma Chaudhry is our other planning hero who helped us put this together today. So we have the four of us have come together under the Nation of Makers organization, which helps to bring together makerspace organizers, not just around the state, but around the country. And so we've spent the last couple of months really focused on Virginia and what's going on here. What is the climate of makerspaces? Who are these spaces? Who's running them? Who are our makers? What are our strengths and our weaknesses here in the state? And learning about the ways that makers and maker events and maker spaces are all partnering with their cities and their communities. And so today we're going to share several of those stories, things that are going well, partnerships that have been forged, over the last 10 years in some case, and some of our spaces are a lot newer than that as well. So if you're familiar with makerspaces, or maybe the makerspace in your area, what you might not know is that no two are alike. They are all different. They are all unique. And one of the reasons is because they are all in different communities, right? Makerspaces evolve based on the need and the talent that's in that area. And so they all look a little bit different from each other. And so I do want you to keep in mind today that if you see a partnership or a program that's working really well, I want you to definitely reach out to your local makerspace or maker event and see how you can replicate that. But keep in mind that your makerspace is not the same as another makerspace. And if there's not a makerspace in your city, then there can be one, but it doesn't have to look exactly like any of these, and it most likely won't. But that's the beautiful thing and the wonderful thing about makers and about makerspaces is really how they adapt and how they grow to be a part of their community, and they grow out of their community. So with that, one of my goals for you here today is for you to, again, connect and partner and find ways to strengthen your community by working with the makers and the events and the maker spaces that are there for you to utilize. So with that, I am going to pass things over to Ryan, who is going to introduce our keynote, Alana Pruis.
Yeah, thanks, Elise. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everything you did to organize this event. So I have the honor of introducing Alana Pruis, our keynote speaker today. Alana Pruis is the founder and CEO of Recast City. Prior to that, she was the vice president and chief staff at Smart Growth America and led the technical assistance program at the EPA Smart Growth Program. She's a TEDx speaker on the economic power of great places and a featured keynote speaker. Her new book, Recast Your City, focuses on how small-scale manufacturing can be a solution for your city. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Alana.
Thank you, Ryan. And I'm really excited to join everybody today. I'm gonna project my slides, but I want you guys to know that you can post questions in the chat anytime, and we will have an open conversation afterwards where you can ask questions or add your solutions. My goal in all of this is for you to come out understanding that what you do, your role in your city, in your community, in your local economy is essential. And that you have phenomenal footing on which to fight for economic investment and support within your community and within the state for what you're doing. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it all fits together. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go from there. Thank you all for hosting me today. I hope the one thing you understand out of all of this is that makers and maker spaces and the businesses that they grow are an essential part of a strong local economy. And as we're coming out of the pandemic, I think we're in an even stronger position to make this case. And I want to just talk about that a little bit as a way to open up the conversation today. We have a lot of communities where people are struggling. Where people have been left behind, where investments haven't gone to those places in a long time, or more recently, things have shut down because of the pandemic. We know that we had things closed for months at a time last year. We had things partially open for a really long time. It's almost hard to remember how bad things were even just 6 months ago, but not that hard yet to remember. And it's a tough place to start. And so I just want to sort of position all of what we're thinking about in this world of the broader economic question that your work is fitting into, right? So in last year's reality, or the last over a year, most small businesses closed for a period of time. We had millions and millions and millions of people file for unemployment last year. But even before COVID, we had this economic reckoning that was going on across the country, where the vast majority of all counties in the country were seeing a decline in working age adult population, right? That means brain drain. They were losing their youth. That means the aging of our population. That means all sorts of different things, but that means an economic struggle for a lot of places. We also have, this is a number from 2019, but we have the greatest income inequality that we've ever recorded in our country. So we're becoming a country of high income jobs and very low wage jobs with nothing left in the middle. And I think makerspaces hold a very special solution to a lot of jobs that are in the middle. We also have this massive racial wealth gap in the country. One of the studies that I found said it's 6.5 times. White households have about 6.5 times the wealth of Black households. Another study I saw said 8 times. But either way, it's bad and it's almost unchanged in the last 5 years. So we have to really look at how are we helping address this wage gap. How are we creating income opportunities now for people and not just saying, oh, this is because of bad things that happened in the past. We have solutions that we can provide right now. And then on top of that, in a ton of our small cities and towns, and even in some of our big cities right now, we have a ton of vacancies. We had vacancies in a lot of our small cities and main streets before COVID hit. And now with its impact on retail, we have even more so. And this impacts property values, this impacts sales revenues, it impacts people's pride in their community. We know that vacant properties have a whole host of negative impacts. So that's a hard place to start. What I'd like to focus us on is that we're actually at this incredibly transformational moment. We have vaccines all over the place. We have American Rescue Plan money that is going directly to every jurisdiction. And we have this adoption of technology in a way that we've never seen before. And I would like you to understand that we need makers to lead. And I really mean lead, because so much has changed, right? We have technology adoption at a pace that people said was going to take us at least a decade to happen. Where we work, how we work, what people even want to do with their work has completely changed. The adoption of online sales is a completely different thing. People can access best of training from across the country and mentors without ever having to leave their home or their hometown. And the American Rescue Plan money is coming. Places that have populations under 50,000, I think, get the first half of their money this July. Larger places have already been starting to see the apportionment. We have rules coming out from the federal government how that money can be used. But there is an opportunity to use this money to create a perpetual economic engine for our communities. So the big question I ask is, how do we help our main streets and our small businesses thrive? And what is the role of maker spaces and maker businesses and small scale manufacturing to do this? How do we save our small businesses and get our community back? How do we not only survive all of this, but how do we rebuild a local economy that's even stronger and more inclusive of more people? So just a little bit about me. You got Ryan's introduction. My name is Alana Pruis. On the left, you see a picture of this amazing dress that my mother sewed for me when I was a teenager. Yes, it was electric blue. It was the most amazing thing. I think she re-sewed the bodice like 7 times before I ever got to touch it. And yes, I did have very short hair at the time. And on the right is a picture of me when I had the opportunity to give a TEDx talk that was entitled The Economic Power of Great Places. So my passion is about creating great places. My other passion are these crazy teens that are now much bigger than me and definitely know how to use drills better than I do, even though I'm pretty good at it still. But the majority of my time is working with communities, community leaders like yourselves, elected officials, downtown leaders, to figure out how do we bring small scale manufacturing businesses into downtowns and into local economic development strategy. I can't sit around tables with you guys quite yet, but we're getting really close, so it's coming soon. The focus of all of that is working with people about how do we grow our economic base with local small businesses and do it in a way that we're attracting young people and families back to town and reinvesting in the people who already live in our community. And we always start with the people who already live in our community. We know what leadership and success looks like in a community. It's not rocket science, right? And this is true of our local economies, and this is true for the work that you're doing in the places you're going. Places want downtown that brings people together. They want to feel included. They want to be in a place that looks and feels cared for. And people want to be a part of success. They want to see things moving. They want to see things happening. The problem with our local economic work, for the most part, is that it's left over from the 70s, and it's a one-size-fits-all model. And it's almost always about what somebody else has is better than what we have. And we need to really realize that the skills that we have in our community and the skills that people can learn in our community, like what you guys can provide, are a big part of the solution. So I talk about this new path forward, and yes, thank you, Ryan. It is in the new book. Book is out June 22nd. It's called Recast Your City. I'll tell you about it later, but we really talk about 4 major things in communities. 1, invest in the people who live there, invest in the place with those people, create a new structure to support that, and think long-term, but act now. Now, I don't know about you, but all 4 of these, to me, I'm pointing at my screen, right? That's why my hand's waving. All 4 of these point to makerspaces to me, because you guys give people and places an opportunity to invest in the people, in their skills, in creating a place where people can come together, and you're building a structure. You're part of the ecosystem of supporting these people, not just on an educational basis, but on an entrepreneurship basis and on a business development basis. And a lot of the work that you can do with makerspaces can show success very quickly while building something bigger for the long term. So I want to talk really briefly about small scale manufacturing as a piece of this. So I talk about small scale manufacturing. My shorthand for it is hot sauce, handbags, and hardware. This is artisans to advanced manufacturing. Anybody who makes a tangible product that you can replicate or sell. So they are a missing piece of this solution for what we need in our communities right now. And they provide us with a whole host of benefits. And you and your work and your makerspaces are a part of this solution, right? Small scale manufacturing businesses give us a reason to gather. Think of the events that you can host or that you're a part of or that your community hosts that give people an opportunity to bring their products to an event, be vendors, showcase what it means to be part of the community, and help build up that excitement and that reason to gather. We couldn't do this for the past year, but I think we're going to come back to this with so much energy because people want to be a part of events again. Second, product businesses help us build more inclusive business communities. Product businesses are not an existing table. It's not a fiefdom. It's not somebody owns that yet. We're actually building something from scratch. So that means that we can build a table of product businesses. It can represent the diversity of our community, race, ethnicity, immigrant status, income, gender, whichever way your community is diverse. You can build a table that represents that diversity and really make sure that the programs that you're creating, the branding you're creating, the economic investments you're creating benefit all of those different populations within your community. Additionally, these businesses can help fill storefronts. This is a woman who obviously makes soaps. She has a big cauldron off to the side. She mixes up her lotions and potions, pours it in the mold. She can staff her production and her retail all at the same time. Cost efficient, staffing efficient. Great way to fill a storefront so it's not vacant. and helps bring energy back to that street. Tons and tons of benefits. And these businesses can sell in person and sell online, so they're not just dependent on that foot traffic. And then as they fill in spaces, they're helping us increase property values, right? Because they're putting something on the street, they're drawing foot traffic, they're creating this energy. And so we're benefiting from it in a number of different ways within our community. And then lo and behold, when we take care of our own business owners, word gets out and we attract more business owners to our community. This is the kind of role as a convener and as an advocate that makerspaces that your work can all help support, so that you're building this strong community of producers, this strong community of educators and makers all around you, with an eye towards local economic development and investing in the places in your community, right? These are all the pieces of creating that thriving local economy and a place people want to be. So what can makers do today to make a difference? I know I'm talking a little fast, but I get so excited about this. So what can you guys do? I have, I think, 5 different things that are part of this. And my number one thing is about taking action, right? So anytime I used to do advocacy days when I worked for Smart Growth America, there always needs to be an ask. So I'm about to give you 5 asks. You can pick and choose from them. But before I do, this is the book. I'm super excited about it. Yes, the cover both has gears and is bright yellow. I'm very excited about this. You can pre-order it from Amazon. If you want to buy 10 or more for your community, for your decision makers, Island Press is offering 25% off or more for orders that go in by June 1st. It's a how-to book. It is a self-help book. This is why you're doing your economic development wrong, and this is how you do it better. And it's a DIY. Here are the clear-cut steps about how to do this. It comes with workbooks and all sorts of fun stuff. So in the meantime, if you want to really look at this combination that I talk about, you can also go to get a free toolkit now at tinyurl.com/recast-tornado. And I talk about this moment that we're in right now is that it's not a perfect storm, it's actually a tornado, that in a lot of communities, COVID really tore our economy apart and tore retail apart and tore our small businesses apart. Some places are almost unscathed because they didn't close that much, for better or for worse. But when we look at rebuilding or building in a better way, there's 2 pieces that happen. One is really strong, purposeful business development support, which you guys are a part of. And the other part is affordable space for businesses as they're starting and scaling and growing, which you're also a part. So I want to make sure that you see how you're a part of that economic strategy, and you can feel free to go to that URL and download it. And later on, I'll put it into the chat. So actions, what are the things that you can do? Number 1, and this is part of what I just mentioned, how do we create affordable space for a diversity of small businesses? We know, and I'm sure you guys know this, that businesses need different kind of space as they're growing. A lot of product businesses work really well that they can produce in a shared space. A makerspace obviously is a part of that solution, or something that's specific to that vertical. So I talk about commercial shared kitchens, right? Or shared wood shops, or shared wood and metal shops, right? Or shared advanced manufacturing spaces. We can have a makerspace, but we can also invest in the different verticals. But that kind of affordable shared space is an essential part of where most businesses are going to start, because as you guys know, the cost of this equipment is too high for a lot of people to have on their own. The second thing is to really think about how we're filling in the gaps with assistance. We have some assets in almost every community. There might be a small business development program. There might be a church that has a kitchen that they're offering up for low cost for people to start businesses. There might be some sort of micro grant program, but there's always gaps. And so I always say, well, what are you trying to achieve? Who do you want to benefit from it? And then which gaps do we need to fill? So it might be something like offering small business assistance in multiple languages. It might be about getting more community leaders involved to get information out to people who have home-based businesses who could be a part of your makerspace, and maybe you're already doing that. But it's also about grants to the service providers. Are the service providers reaching all of the target populations within your community? How are they reaching Black business owners, Latino business owners, women business owners, immigrant business owners? Are their needs different? Are their training needs different? Are their capital needs different? Are their space needs different? How do they use makerspaces? And let's understand this need in detail. Third ask is about connecting with local anchors. The local anchor can be the local government, a school system, a major big business that's in the area, hospital, anybody who's got spends a lot of money on something is a local anchor to me. They buy stuff, they buy services, they buy products. Can we build relationships with them to help them direct, at the beginning, maybe 1 or 2 of their product purchases to the local community, to makers in your community, to producers in your community? Can we then build up relationships with them so that you do a reverse pitch with them, so they can come to the Makerspace and say, here are 10 things we're going to be buying next year. We'd love to buy it locally. If somebody can fill this need with these specifications, and let's figure out how we actually build up that capacity. We saw this need with the emergency need around PPEs, right? Our Makerspaces came and literally saved the day all over the country. Our local anchors can be long-term investors in some of those needs and be buying them over time. 4th is about policies. I am a policy wonk at heart. That's where I started all my work. But these are policies both about supply chain and permitting. So when I talk about storefronts, a lot of times storefronts don't allow artisan manufacturing or production in that space. We have to change our local zoning and our permitting to allow these kinds of uses in our storefronts. And then we do have to look at the investment in our policies around supply chain. Is there any required supply chain that the community has to have on hand? Can they procure that supply chain from somebody locally? Is there a way for them to invest in local production because of that purpose? And what are the policies around that? So that's one more. And then the last one is community pride. And I know Makerspaces are an amazing part of this already, but people are so proud of meeting people who make stuff in their community. And I hope you guys still see this in the work that you do. I see it in every conversation that I have. And the people who make the things are so proud of being part of the community. And so it's really important to remember that as we're doing this, we need to talk about the story. We need to share the story of what it means to be a part of this community and what it means to be a part of a producer in this community, being it on the side of education, being it on the side of economic development and business development, whatever it is. What's the brand? How are you promoting it? How are you sharing even the work, the process of getting there? The more people know about the process, the more they feel bought into what you're doing and feel like they can be a part of it. So those are the 5 asks. And I'm just hoping with all of this, it sort of helps you realize how to engage in this. This is the tiny URL again, tinyurl.com/recast-tornado. I'd be happy to connect with everybody on LinkedIn, and I can put that in the chat as well. But you can just look up my name on LinkedIn and connect. But I think the important thing to remember is where we're going, right? What are we trying to achieve? What is that outcome that we're trying to achieve? And from my perspective, we're trying to achieve places where people can come together, where people are proud of being in part of that community, where people can have good paying jobs or create businesses that are paying good wages, and be proud of their participation in the community that way, and really be a place where people can come together to be a part of that work. It takes leadership, right? It takes elected leadership, it takes community leadership, it takes volunteer leadership to make that happen. And we need to create that storyline and really share that with people as well and how they're going to get there. So for me, it's all about creating great places that people are proud to call home. And that's why I do this. And that's why I would love to support you guys in whatever you're doing. Again, happy to connect in any way. And if the book is of interest and of service to what you guys are doing, you can actually get access to the first chapter on the book's website, which is recastyourcity.com. Very catchy. So with that, I will stop sharing the screen, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Before we jump into that, I would like to note that we at Nation of Makers and Virginia Nation of Makers in particular are excited to offer a copy of Alana's book to each of you for attending. So I believe Elise put a link in the chat so just drop your name and email and all that fun stuff, and obviously your shipping address, and we will get a copy of that over to you. Yeah, let's see. I think the easiest way would probably be for folks to raise their hand using the reactions button at the bottom if you have a question for Alana. And while we're waiting for some of those, Jean, were there questions in the chat during the
There
conversation?
haven't been questions yet, but thank you everyone for introducing yourself. And for those who haven't, please go ahead and do that. But we'd love to take questions.
So one of the notes that comes up in here is about the price of space. Not just about permitting for makerspaces, which I agree is a barrier in a lot of communities, but the cost of space. One of the things that I've been starting to talk to folks about is that affordable space for local businesses is a public good, just like affordable housing. And I don't want to take anything away from affordable housing. Affordable housing is a real need, especially right now. I did affordable housing for a long time, but it doesn't need to be an either or, especially with the American Rescue Plan funding coming to our communities. This is really an opportunity for us to invest in affordable space for production. So that might be, if you have a community development corporation, they can buy a property and rent it at a low cost to locally owned product businesses. That could be a program that the city or the jurisdiction puts in place to help defray or subsidize some of the cost of spaces. One of the programs that I helped launch is in South Bend, Indiana. We helped them launch a program that trains existing product businesses to be stronger, more resilient, scaling businesses, and provides them with subsidized space for a year in an older manufacturing building that is getting rehabbed right next to downtown. So that's the city investing funding in it. So there's plenty of precedent for this at this point. So that's just something to think about as I know that the cost of space is really getting very high for folks.
And we did have a comment with a little bit of a question from Trish. And Trish, I think you're now unmuted.
Yes, thank you. Hi. I'm a member of Vector Space and friends with Elise and Adam, but I also am the outreach coordinator at the Claytor Nature Center. And I have just been part of the maker movement in my personal life for a long time, always making things and creating. But as we had a seminar at the Nature Center this weekend with it was a sustainable agriculture seminar, and several of the farmers that were present were talking about how they produce on such a small scale that they can't afford large, high volume farming equipment. But it would certainly be useful for them to have access to those things. And I was wondering if, Bedford, which is I guess a sub or a neighboring county of Lynchburg, there's a lot of makers out there too, and but they do a lot of stuff in their own space and farms. Has anyone in the maker community here seen anything like that that's geared towards agricultural equipment that they create a sharing network for?
Well, actually, I'm adding an agribusiness. I quit calling it farming. I'm calling it agribusiness, so they take it more seriously. And I'm adding the Secretary of Agriculture for the state of North Carolina is in the process of giving me content and programs because they get involved in pneumatics, electronics, drones to manage crops. There's a lot of high-tech activity going on in farming now that kids don't know about.
I think that raises an interesting question, Alana, about, especially our rural communities. I know where I live in the Shenandoah Valley, most of the communities here are very small and very rural. And so have you seen makerspaces in those areas, or have you seen kind of those transformations differ from the transformations in maybe larger areas?
Absolutely. So two pieces, Trish. One, there are models, not necessarily in this country, of cooperatives that have shared ownership of that ag equipment. There's definitely some in Israel. They're called a moshav. And so there's models in different parts of the world around that kind of shared equipment where they literally have a cooperative that owns the equipment where they all get a piece of it at different times of the year. So that model is out there, almost no different than having a cooperative store, right, where you're paying a membership fee. Ryan, from a rural perspective, yes, definitely. It in some ways looks very different. In some ways, it's very much the same. I just finished up a project in Heflin, Alabama, town population of about 5,000 people. They have a 2-block Main Street, might be 3 blocks. Single-story buildings and a couple of 2-story buildings, right? Lots of people are making stuff. They're all making it in their shed, in their backyard, in the garage. They're probably not, honestly, they're probably not ready for a makerspace. They don't, unless they're going to do something that's really a regional pull. But they have a lot of people doing woodworking at home. And the thing that I realized with them is that if they could get a space where they could have just a few higher end wood pieces of equipment, that might be something that would be more of a shared possibility for the folks who do want to create wood product businesses. And that might help them reduce their own cost and have higher margins on their wood products, because we know wood product businesses don't have that great margins on what they're selling. So we look very specifically at who's in that community, what are they making, and where are they trying to go with that to figure out where that would be. At the same time, though, there are so many people in that community who have those skills. I also encourage them that when they do community festivals, they should have programming and education for the kids, where people from the community who know how to use all these tools are coming out and showcasing it, right? And it's more like we would describe a mobile makerspace than anything else, but really a way to sort of socialize and keep bringing that kind of experience back to the kids and back to the community. So I think there's a lot of different ways to get there. Their challenge was much more around vacant properties, vacant storefronts in downtown, but also the lack of any kind of business development support. So it might not be, they might create one space that has a whole bunch of their products, or they might create a partnership that does training not only for startup product businesses. One of the things that they talked about was a lot of people were opening businesses and storefronts, but having no business plan and no business experience, and really not having their ducks in line. Is that what the line is? Their ducks in line to really stay in business for a long time. And so things were opening and closing within months. And so one of the major recommendations I made to them was that, create this startup program, host it in town. And that's an important thing to think about. People, and I'll finish my sentence before I go back to that, host it in town and make sure that the people that are launching are more likely to succeed. One of the things to remember about business training, and this is great for a makerspace, is that people need to feel comfortable in the business training. So I advocate for putting business trainings in the neighborhoods where we want people to be launching businesses, and not expecting everybody to join a makerspace or innovation space or somewhere else that they might require a car, or it might be really far from where they live, or it might be people who don't look like them, right? There's so many different barriers that people face to be a part of something. And so really thinking about who do we want in this program, who do we want to benefit from it, and how do we go to them?
Great.
I think that's great.
I've got a quick question, Ilana. On the other side of the spectrum, where I'm up in Fairfax County, and I imagine this might be similar to other larger urban areas. Our economic development, stakeholders are focused a great deal on bringing in large companies with a batch of jobs. So getting them to focus on small business can be challenging. What strategies have you seen work elsewhere?
Absolutely, and I'm on the other side of the region. I'm in Maryland, so I have a similar problem with Montgomery County, Maryland. Similar challenge. They want the jobs. You guys got HQ too, so that's a whole different ballgame. But Montgomery County is all about biohealth. The case to me is very different, and the case is this: when those businesses are recruiting, and that you want them to be able to recruit young people want cool stuff to do and cool places to go. So if you're not thinking about what's going into your storefronts, and you don't have an entrepreneurship programming that's not just tech, you're going to be missing something that's about creating the vibrant place that keeps people. And ultimately, that's going to be a big part of the competition for this recruitment. The reality is that recruitment, I think I'm remembering the number correctly, recruitment brings something like 70% of all their employees with them. So the whole recruitment game is not about helping people who are unemployed, or even helping people in that local community. It's some crazy number, and they may or may not want to hear that. But I think there is a really important moment right now of saying we need to create a more inclusive local economy. The way to create a more inclusive local economy is to create an opportunity for more people to not only start their business, but to grow their business in our community. And this is the kind of programming, this is the kind of space that makes a difference. So that's on the inclusive side and the equity side of all of that. And then on the competitive side, we need spaces that stand out. So places that look like everywhere else, places that are just filled with chain stores, are just going to be replaced by the next community out. So when we can fill a neighborhood main street or a central business district with unique businesses, including makers and maker businesses, then that place can't be replaced by the next town out, because there's nowhere that's going to have businesses just like that with the same stories. Even if you have a candle shop and a brewery and they have a candle shop and a brewery, the stories that are a part of your candle shop and your brewery and the personality of that place will be different. And so it's really that uniqueness of place that is going to hold the long-term value. That being said, you're totally right. It's really hard. And the prices of the space are really high. So I just finished a project in Santa Monica, California, telling them that they have to put real money into this. They need to subsidize space. And that is a public good, that if they really mean it, that they want an inclusive and equitable economy, you have to put money behind it. And that's in training and in the cost of space.
Thank you.
Jean, this is Tracy Bledo, and I'm in Bedford County. And one of the things you could do is talk to your economic developers about their incentive guidelines. I know in our county, we looked at our incentive guidelines. And when I first started 10 years ago in my job, you had to bring in like 25 employees to even have the EDA consider it. And you had to bring in so much in investment. And we lowered some of those thresholds. For example, we lowered ours to 10. And sometimes I wonder if we should have even gone lower with all the robotics that's out there. So it's just a conversation that you can plant the seed for them to talk to their economic development authorities.
Thank you.
Any other questions that folks have?
All right. It looks like that was it. Any other, just one last check, any other questions, any other final comments, anything there? No?
You're all getting the book anyway, so you'll be able to answer all your own questions then. But if you get the book and you love it, please share it with others. Tell your friends, tell your city council members, tell your economic development leadership. It's all I'm going to talk about for many, many months to come. So I always love having a crew of people helping spread the word. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and just to, I know that you have another speaking engagement coming up with Virginia's DHCD. Do you want to plug that really quickly?
That's not till August, September? I think that's not for a while.
Yeah, it's a little, I saw it on a newsletter or something, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. I can see her twice in 1 year. This is wonderful.
I see her three times, Ryan, because she's also our non-con
There we go.
conference speaker. So you'll see her even sooner than that.
This is crazy. This is excellent. Yeah, 3 times in 1 year.
You'll have plenty of me by the time we're done with this. I'm going to be everywhere. No, it's great to join you guys today. And thank you so much. It's wonderful to be a part of this crowd.
Thank you. Thank you, Alana. All right. Well, I think we will go ahead and introduce our next speaker. And I believe he is on. Yeah. Okay. So our next speaker is John Stover. John is the founder and managing partner of John Stover and Associates, an economic development consulting firm that bridges the gap between business, city government, nonprofits, and the community. Mr. Stover is an expert in neighborhood revitalization and public-private economic development initiatives. In 2017, his firm produced the Innovation Space and Marketplace report on developing a makerspace in Washington, D.C. Sorry, I was makerspace on the brain, right? And so for this section, our speakers are going to talk a little bit about their personal experiences working in and around makerspaces and policy. And we have 4 of those speakers. And then when those 4 speakers are done, we'll ask questions at the end. So please put your questions in the chat so that you don't forget what they were, and we'll make sure to read them off. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to our first speaker, John Stover.
So hey everyone, I'm pleased to be speaking with you. So my firm, we call ourselves Economic Development Consultants. The firm's name is John Stover and Associates, and we specialize in retail market analysis, economic development policy and strategy, all sorts of public, private, and nonprofit partnership. But we're really not experts at all in makerspaces. And in fact, before 2017, we'd done very little, kind of peripherally, but really didn't know makerspaces. And then we were brought on by the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development in Washington, D.C., to help them figure out. They had kind of earmarked funding as part of the Made in DC program to understand the makerspace context and climate, and to kind of have some sort of game plan to move forward. And so we were retained to do that. And so what I'm going to talk through with you all today is kind of our experience as a roadmap or rubric for kind of how we went about thinking through what is a makerspace, how do we, and once we kind of learned about all the different things that a makerspace can be, how do we help zoom in on that, kind of applying our approach towards thinking about public-private partnership and market analysis and supply and demand and needs and business support strategy. How can we kind of create a system, a logical, kind of clear system for the city and its partners to think through what should this space be, what should kind of policy implications and spending implications moving forward be. And then I'm gonna talk through just kind of some of the implications that we've seen in our work during kind of projected beyond COVID, and what those implications might mean for makerspaces. And I'm going to do a kind of bad presentation faux pas of using the report from that we issued as the presentation slides. And we did, it's funny, a lot of reports are kind of deliberately double as both presentation, we call it slide doc format. So hopefully you'll forgive me for that. And again, the project was conducted in early 2017. So not completely current, but the methods and the way that we kind of thought about this can not only apply to any time period, but can apply to any geographical location, type of environment, type of community, and so forth. So hopefully there's something for folks, regardless of kind of the context that you're coming from. And how we thought about structuring this assessment was starting off with taking a huge step back of, wait, what is it that we're talking about? What are the definitions here? And just starting to kind of make sure that expectations were aligned, and that the words that we're using have any relevance. And to Ryan's point about the complexity, the kind of mandated name of this report was I need to even look it up to make sure I get it right, the Innovation Space and Marketplace Report. And so I still don't really understand what that means, or what the all those kind of buzzwords crammed into one sentence really represents. And so first we thought about, okay, what's the context here, that let's get all on the same page and be using the same language. Secondly was existing conditions. So what what is the supply of anything related to innovation space or makerspace? What is the demand for this type of use? And what are the best practices? What information can we glean from folks that have done this successfully before? The next kind of approach was, okay, well, given all that, what's the opportunity here? And how does this kind of ambiguous makerspace start to take shape? What are the programmatic elements? And what's the intentionality of this? And then we looked into kind of sequentially, okay, well, then how do you operate that? What are from the equipment to site selection to development to partnership? How do you start to make that a reality? And then lastly, the implementation. Well, what's kind of a strategic plan for moving forward and getting this done? So, I mentioned that this was a political mandate as part of the Made in DC program, and that the, again, charge here was really ambiguous. And we, meeting with the different city agencies, not all the agencies were on the same page. We had the Department of Small Local Business Development, the Office of Planning, and DEMP had the Deputy Mayor's Office for Planning and Economic Development. And all three of them kind of have their own interests and objectives and capacity and ability to kind of play a role in this space. And very quickly, one of the most fundamental aspects of our work was, okay, there's kind of four concepts, four programmatic elements that could be defined as either actually I've been saying the word, it's not even innovation space and makerspace, it was innovation space and marketplace report and assessment. So there's kind of 4 programmatic elements that could be defined as an innovation space and or marketplace. One is the concept of collaboration or co-working, a number of folks doing work together. Another was creation, so kind of physically creating a product in a particular physical place. Another we called counsel or support services, from technical assistance to accelerator, incubator kind of assistance to from accounting and legal and any of the other aspects that small businesses struggle with and prefer to disregard as much as possible, but ultra important. And then fourthly, sales space. So kind of the retail component and how do you show potential consumers or customers this product, and how do you kind of get that out into the marketplace. And so as part of our process, we looked into, so kind of once we were on the same page, okay, here's 4 elements that we're going to look into. Is there viability here? Is there interest? Is there capacity? Is there a need? How does this align? We looked into the policy context, where do the kind of political agendas and resources lie? We looked into just the local ethos. Who are we serving? What is DC? What is the business element and entrepreneurs out there that we're looking to support? We looked into, what is the breakdown of businesses that were classified by the district as makers? What industries did those serve? We conducted business owner interviews of makers, and really kind of got to the heart of how did you get to where you are? Where do you want to go? And it's kind of still those nascent businesses, working from the garage, or maybe they just moved into some sort of production space, or maybe they're just transitioning from kind of an enthusiast to starting to sell their product, and looking into, based on their industry and their own needs and their own interests, is there an opportunity to share resources? Is there opportunity to have a co-working space? Is there opportunity to share a printing green press or certain sort of woodworking elements that they couldn't afford in-house? And we looked into what are the kind of existing buckets or categories too of these types of spaces. And we found that, well, there's a number of kind of fabrication spaces really oriented towards, again, hobbyists or the community, kind of coming in, using a 3D printer, coming in, learning how to, having these saws, or having CAD or Photoshop, or these different elements that they wouldn't have had access to, but really not as oriented towards businesses. And then, we found, there's lots of co-working spaces. And then there's incubators, really with the intention of developing a business and helping it kind of grow from a startup into an established business and beyond. We looked into kind of where do these fall within geographically, what types of spaces are where, and who do they serve. We looked into not only kind of a deep dive of a number of these makerspaces, and then we kind of cross-compared, okay, so we have all this information, how can we think logically about kind of comparing the ecosystem out there? So we made like a little rubric, and this ended up being something that was kind of insightful or helpful, and looking at, okay, well, on the one axis, we have the types of elements that we could have, right? There's the production space, there's the co-working, there's the support services, there's the retail element, and on the other is kind of who's the intended user. Are we talking about hobbyists and artists and community residents? Are we talking about kind of part-time entrepreneurs that kind of dabble but are really looking to sell it potentially, or see if there's there? Are we talking about startup businesses? We're talking about established businesses. And what we found at this time, and you may notice that the local conditions have changed pretty considerably, there was a whole lot of emphasis on the kind of community-oriented folks dabbling, exposing people to different things, and there was not as much emphasis on kind of more, within kind of the makerspace context of kind of business-oriented makerspaces, and kind of across all the different elements of from production to co-working and support services. We looked into national case studies and kind of what has gone right, what our lessons, and kind of interviewed folks from around the country, understood kind of best practices and implications from those. And another element that we really focused on and found interesting was what we called the maker to market pathway. So part of our thinking through too was, well, it's really kind of it's not separate silos or buckets when you kind of think about that process from, I would like to learn how to make something, or, to, okay, now I'm learning how to make it, and to, hey, it's a hobby, but maybe I could turn this into a business. And well, maybe I could actually kind of, scale this in a way, maybe this could actually be my full-time job. So, hey, I want to expand this, maybe even staff, or maybe even a space to operate in, to it actually becomes a production and becomes sustainable. And so when we kind of think about that earlier part of the process, we thought about this as a community serving makerspace, right? Like these are enthusiasts, community, potential entrepreneurs, kind of equipping them with the ability to potentially take an idea or learn a skill and translate that into a business. And we thought through, well, what do innovation spaces or maker spaces, kind of what's the composition of those programmatic elements within a community serving makerspace? And it's really most about creation and having access to the tools to learn how to do it. But then there's certainly an element of collaboration, of support services, and oftentimes that kind of small kind of retail bay of like showing off the products that folks have created and helping them sell it or gain exposure. And then we kind of thought about the middle section of the turning it from a hobby into a business, but just the beginning startup of a business where you can't afford the resources completely in-house, and by having multiple folks kind of use a particular piece of equipment or a space, that becomes something that more folks can actually build from and gain from. And we kind of thought of that as an industry serving makerspace, a different orientation in terms of the elements that would be required, and then the third element being kind of more emphasis on the maker's showroom and support center. So all about kind of, okay, it's more of an established business that knows how to make something. How do we help them take those products again to market? And so we really worked with and vetted with the city of, okay, it could be some kind of combination of this, but what you can't do and what we've seen routinely fail is stuff that tries to be everything, right? If you try to do everything all at once, you don't have the capacity to execute it all really well. And so we really, the idea to kind of refine and understand kind of which of these elements and what kind of combination do you want to choose. And so what we did was kind of develop a process about kind of looking at these three scenarios and in equipping the city and its partners with the information to make a decision. And not, it's so much of it is interest and capacity and politics. So we knew we couldn't, and we were kind of given the charge of, we couldn't be definitive about exactly what it should be. We needed to kind of set the stage so that the political partners could be informed enough where they could help invest and move in a certain direction. So kind of cross-compared the scenarios with what are operating costs for these different scenarios, what are the physical attributes and site location attributes that these different scenarios might need, what type of equipment, to what type of ownership, what type of existing spaces in DC might actually be good spaces for these to locate at, what are the development costs, who are the potential partners, and then developing that strategic framework of really breaking it down. Okay, here's what it would take to create a community serving makerspace. Here's what it would take to create a industry serving makerspace. Here's what it would take to create a maker showroom and support center, and create a little summary chart, a little evaluation rubric of kind of all the political pressures and benefits and fiscal costs and economic impact and community objectives and marketplace need and all these different elements to just help tee up as usefully as possible and help guide into the direction that we thought would be the most viable and most impactful, where this, what this type of space should be, and put together a work plan and strategic plan for how to execute it. And in terms of what were the big takeaways from our perspective, that's really, a makerspace can mean just about anything, and I think that's kind of a recurring theme here so far from the folks that have spoken, and it's really important to understand, well, what are the objectives of the partners? What is the will and interest of the people involved? probably most importantly, what is the need at hand? You know, who are we trying to serve, and what do they actually need in terms of being served? Where's the gap in their services? Because there's, you know, where is something that, so there's certain elements that are sexier than others, and there's certain types of charges that folks are, you know, there's more funding for, there's more support for, and there's other things that are really important that don't have that same kind of base. And then how can this be done in a sustainable way? And then, you know, use that information to help guide what exactly is the model or construct here. And then lastly, thinking through what are the implications kind of moving forward in a post-COVID world. And what we ended up kind of recommending in this particular context was what has kind of sustained itself in DC, which was the showroom space of kind of providing a channel for people to experience these products is really kind of a fundamental aspect. Shop Made in DC has been, and with wonderful support of DC and many other partners, has been just a wonderful example of expanding and providing those local makers products to a large base. And then the other folks that have done well are kind of those more business oriented. And speaking in DC, and again, so most of the people on this call, I've realized I'm presenting to folks that are so much more informed about the actual subject matter and context than I am. But then, you know, and then speaking in terms of, you know, big picture implications of the economic analysis and the economic development strategy work that we do, I think that there's a lot of reasons to be excited about the upcoming viability and need for makerspaces in the near term and in the longer term. And what those are for me are, there's wonderful statistics that nationally business startups and new business licenses increased 25% over normal years during the pandemic. So business creation, you would think, would have kind of slowed down, halted. People, you know, no, it soared by most standards during the pandemic. Secondly, there's just so many paradigms that are shifting. There's a need for innovation. There's a need for exploring new solutions. You know, consumer habits are changing so quickly. People are having to adjust in the marketplace fast, and to be able to kind of equip folks with good ideas to be able to execute fast is really key. In addition, a really kind of big elephant in the room is, well, what's going to happen to other land uses, especially office and retail? And I think that most folks and most of the projections that we're seeing predict that office space is going to take a little bit of a hit, and you know, a certain percent of folks commuting downtown will work remotely. Land values will likely decrease, and as we know, you know, low land values is such a key aspect of a viable makerspace. And we all know, or you know, I present and talk a lot about the over-retailed nature of the United States. We have multiples more of retail square footage than the next country, and that's right sizing. And that was right sizing really rapidly before the pandemic, and then even more so post-pandemic. DC and the region has some issues with high retail vacancy. That's going to continue getting worse. But there's a need then from a vibrancy and placemaking vantage point in terms of how do we activate these spaces. And there's a need from an economic vantage point. Property owners are really hurting and really struggling. How do we help them have a viable use that is supporting their property and the local neighborhood, in addition to supporting the local small business community? And and those kind of key charges of having that vacant space of placemaking, brand identity, and local pride are concepts that are as strong as ever as well. So with all of those reasons, I think there's no reason to think that there's not kind of growing momentum for this type of use. And Alana mentioned this too. From looking at, we've been keeping up, and we're doing a bunch of work related to the American Rescue Plan and helping develop strategies and uses and fundraising efforts to secure funds for, from this plan. So much of that charge aligns with helping small businesses that are impacted negatively during COVID, aligns with helping to start startups. There's a lot of these funds that would be really competitively used and secured with the purpose of makerspaces and those types of uses, especially pitched the right way for to Office of Treasury and the local organizations and cities that are issuing those funds. So again, I think that there's a really big opportunity here in upcoming years. And so with that, I think I went a couple minutes over, but it was good talking to you, and thanks for bearing with my extremely rapid presentation through 76 slides in 15 minutes of time.
No, thank you, John. That was great. I think that's especially for you know, newer makerspace organizers. You know, it can be challenging to develop that relationship with your economic development officials, because sometimes, and one of the notes that I dropped in the chat was, you know, we speak two different languages sometimes, and it's economic development is, you know, has its own language, its own jargon, its own, you know, mission and goals, you know, and makerspaces and maker organizers are very different sometimes. And so trying to bridge that language gap, you know, is a big first step. And so I know that Dorothy commented that the larger Nation of Makers policy and economic development group is working toward creating some resources for makerspace organizers. So that's very, very exciting. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Dorothy, or not to put you on the spot? You can say no.
Yeah, no worries. So we're really trying, I mean, our policy working group really has been mostly makers from the maker side of things. So it's a really interesting opportunity. John, I'd love to pick your brain and anyone else who's interested in kind of helping out with the efforts, but we really need more economic development folks and folks that are on the side of policy making as well. We do have a few policymakers that have been joining us. It really helps us with the language. And I have worn a policy cap, so I have a little bit of background in policy, but certainly I'm not the world's expert, and I'm certainly not the world's expert on economic development and business. But I think there is a little bit of language, and then to the point that was made a little bit earlier around economic development in general. When you look at the funding that the EDA has, a lot of times it's, you know, if you read through those RFPs, they're really, really dense, and there's often a match that's required. And it's, you know, and sometimes it's really, really confusing for maker organizations to understand and navigate, you know, how do we even get access to these dollars? And you know, I think the thing that you can take home from this is really that all of you are human beings. So it's, you know, it's not that you're not interested in talking to folks, and that some of it is a little bit of being brave and being willing to have these conversations about, you know, we're all trying to go to, you know, to have the same end point of making our communities better. And so, you know, there's this opportunity to really increase that dialogue. So one of the things Nation of Makers is trying to do is to do that. So certainly would welcome anyone in this group that wants to engage. I'm happy to give you information. We meet every Thursday at 4. So happy to tie you into that. And if you can't make that time, we can find another time to talk.
Excellent. Jean, were there any other comments in the chat? I know there were there's a lot of conversation going on in the chat. Were there any questions in there for John?
There were a couple. You had one. Asma had a question really more for the other space leads. And then Dorothy, you had a question, as did Joel. So in that order.
I forgot we were going to wait until the end. I totally broke my own system here. We were going to run through the speakers and then ask questions. So I apologize. I guess I just got excited to talk in front of people. You know, it's kind of weird. So I'll just go ahead and jump into our next speaker, which I think may answer some of our questions, according to Elise. Our next speaker is Alicia Medor, if I'm not pronouncing Meador. Okay, thank you. And she's the Economic Development Manager for the City of Lynchburg. And so her position lies in the balance between employees and citizens, and she is dedicated to finding creative solutions that benefit both. So take it away, Alicia.
All right, thank you. No pressure, right? So I'm happy to try and help bridge the gap between makers and economic development. It's not as big, I don't think, as we think it is sometimes. It's just, yeah, different verbiage and things, you know. So John, I'm going to one-up you and not even have an official presentation. So I'm going to share with you some slides from our website and talk through a little bit, but really what I'm doing is sharing kind of a practical example of what both Alana and John have been talking about. So we have partnered with Elise and Adam at Makerspace to do a women in machining program. And so I'm just going to kind of walk through what that is, what it looks like, how it came to be, and we can go from there. So I'll go ahead and see if I can share my screen here. All right. Can you all see this? Does it say the City of Opportunity? Perfect. All right. So for those of you who have not been to Lynchburg or don't know where Lynchburg is, we are in Central Virginia. It is about 50 square miles, landlocked, an old city, a very old city. So some of the things that Alana was talking about earlier about placemaking and using what you have and knowing, you know, the people and the places that you have are very, very, very important, especially in Lynchburg. We don't have lots of green space that we can develop. We don't have, you know, a place where we can just prop up a new building whenever we feel like it. So we really are focused on investing in the citizens and the economy that we have here in Lynchburg. So a little bit about myself. I actually have a background in workforce development. I worked in a supported employment agency and on some policy levels with the state for adults with disabilities for a little over 10 years. And that's kind of what, in a long roundabout, long-winded way, led me to where I am now. I won't get into that. But workforce development is a passion of mine, and it's part of what we do here in the Economic Development and Tourism Office for the city. So I'll share first what this Women in Machining program is, and then I'll kind of tell you about how it came to be as part of city programming. So the Women in Machining program is in its second year, and this is a 12-week program. And it's in partnership with Makerspace, which is our local makerspace in Lynchburg, and also with another local organization, which has an acronym of NOW. It stands for Non-Traditional Occupations for Women. So NOW provides a mentorship piece to the program. They meet one-on-one with a mentor once or twice a week, and they also provide wraparound services, things like transportation and childcare for the participants in the program. And then Makerspace serves as a host. So they provide the tools, the instructors, the training, basically all of the expertise that we need for the programming. And then the city is providing the funding. And the funding is actually coming through some grants that we have at the city. So I will scroll down here and you can see where it says Blueprint for Opportunity? Great. I have two screens going, so I want to make sure you guys are seeing the right things. So how this started was in 2019. Adam and Elise approached us to see if we could partner with them and work with them on an SBA, Small Business Administration match grant that they were going for. So we were looking to be a partner with them to connect them with local employers for this program. The goal of the program is to train these women who are in an underserved population in our community on, basic machining skills. We have, as you can see on your screen, metals and machinery is one of our top industries in the area. We are unofficially known as the manufacturing hub of Central Virginia. We have a lot of employers that utilize these skill sets. We don't have a lot of women that utilize these skill sets in our area, which is where this program kind of came in. So we worked with them to kind of get the program off the ground, applied for the grant. They were not awarded the SBA grant, but we had this great framework in place, so we kind of sat down and talked about, okay, what can we do with this? The city has grants through TANF, through the state, so temporary assistance for needy families. And the whole point of those grants is to go towards workforce development for underserved populations. So it really was kind of a perfect match at that point. We had to tweak a few things here and there, but overall, we were able to take the framework that Elise and Adam had originally written for the SBA grant and transfer it to the city's grant. So we're able to fully fund the program. This is our second year. I think I said that earlier. And it falls under what we call our Hire Lynchburg partnership. So Hire Lynchburg is really the workforce development initiative for the city. So what we do is exactly this. We partner with employers, we partner with local organizations, and we try to see how we can help them meet their workforce development needs. Especially after this last year, I'm sure you all have seen and experienced this either firsthand or with people that you've worked with. You know, employment is hard right now. Finding jobs is hard, filling jobs is hard, finding people with the right skill sets is really difficult. And so our goal through our workforce development initiatives is really to match the citizens in our city with the jobs that are in our city. So looking at where those gaps are and how we can creatively meet those needs. So on the screen where it says Blueprint for Opportunity, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. It's a little long, but that is our 5-year strategic plan that we started in 2018. And so goal 3 of that initiative is specifically centered around talent development. So the Hire Lynchburg program was created to bolster that goal. And it really exists to support the talent and demand skill development for our industries in Lynchburg. This past year with COVID, obviously, everything has kind of gotten upended and turned on its head. So we did kind of revamp what our 5-year strategic plan looked like, and we've kind of condensed it down. So I'll share all this in the chat too, but when you go in and look at it, you'll see a kind of a condensed version of that. And so now it kind of resides under goal 2, which is to drive the long-term economic growth and resilience for our city. I will go ahead and share what our Hire Lynchburg program looks like here. All right, so this is our separate website for Hire Lynchburg. Is that showing up? Yeah, cool. So this is where both employers can go if they're curious, or it's citizens if they want to get connected to programming. So this is really a way that we can work with our local citizens and our local community to help match them with programs that are going to train them for the jobs that we have. The Women in Machining program specifically, these are some pictures from the current cohort of it, is completely run at Makerspace. There are volunteer instructors who are either retired or work with local machining and manufacturing operators and teach them to do things like use a lathe or a brake press or a bunch of other machinery that I am completely unfamiliar with, but that is why I'm not teaching it. So the women go to class a couple nights a week. They get to do hands-on training with the instructors. They also do one-on-one mentorships with the now mentors, and they actually make products. So from start to finish, they're doing math skills, they're doing critical thinking, they're planning things out, and making, I believe last year they made rolling pins, and something Elise can fill that in if I miss anything. This one, she actually made a bracelet, you can see there. So it's a lot of detailed work. It's a lot of really fine-tuning skill sets. Some of them come in knowing a little bit about it. Some of them come in knowing nothing about it. And it's really been a cool way to engage not only with the community, but also with our employers. You know, some of the positives, I think, are that it really is non-traditional in so many ways. I'm going to stop screen sharing now. Let's see here. There we go. It's very, you know, not a traditional approach to workforce development, which in a lot of ways is great because it provides a lot of freedom for the individuals and the employers to really explore some new opportunities and different ways of training and of hiring. You know, we do have a large population that's getting ready to retire out of our manufacturing and machining industries, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to fill those jobs, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years. And so coming up with creative partnerships like this is a really good way to try to invest in those jobs. The employers, you know, last year we were really excited about the program, and we had employers signed on that were going to interview people and offer them positions potentially at the end of the program. And then COVID hit. And so they could not go into the employers and or they weren't hiring, so that was a whole wrench in the plan. But they were able to complete the program and at least get the skill set. This year, we did a lot of legwork on the beginning and have, talked with employers. Elise and Adam have gone and toured employers, and we've partnered with quite a few on varying levels. Some of them are like, yeah, bring them in, we'll do a tour, we'll show them what we have going on. Some are committing to interview them for apprenticeships or internships. Some may offer them jobs at the end. So it's a really unique opportunity. It can be a bit of a heavy lift, when employers are used to doing things a certain way. It's a little scary to try to take on somebody that's coming in from a different vantage point. And then even from the local government end, it's using grant funding and being creative with how we do that and what that looks like for economic development. So yeah, it's been a great program. We've had a really positive experience so far, not without its glitches for sure. It's in its second year. So, but we do have a lot of good ideas and plans for, upcoming programs. We'd love to do some with high school students and kind of expand it out into some bigger opportunities. So that is what I have. And like I said, I'll share with you in the chat some of these links and everything, but I'm happy to answer any questions, or Elise can also answer them.
All right, excellent. I think we'll jump to the next speaker as some of the questions are coming in. So keep thinking about that and just drop those in the chat as they come up. I know I have a couple questions I'd like to ask, but I'll save those and won't make the same mistake twice and get to the next speaker so that we have time for everyone. Our next speaker is Max Bareiss. He's a board member at Hacksbug in Blacksburg. Hacksbug was founded in 2014 and is Blacksburg's first community makerspace. The space is located within the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. Max, did I say your last name correctly?
You got close. Max Bareiss.
Bareiss. I will get someone's name totally correct by the end of this, I promise. All right, Max, well, take us away and let's hear about the work that you do.
All right, thank you. I will share slides. All right, got stuff strewn across monitors. I gotta go all my monitors figured out. All right, so we've got slides and sound from me. All right. So thank you for that introduction. I am Max Preuss. I'm one of 3 board members at Hacksbug who do all our day-to-day operations of keeping things running. And I'm going to talk about a little bit of what we've been doing, our little piece in teaching the next generation of makers. So we got a little bit of an introduction, but just to say a little bit about Hacksbug itself. Hacksbug is a nonprofit makerspace that was founded in 2014. We're right outside of the main campus of Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia, in Southwest Virginia. We are in the Virginia Tech's Corporate Research Center. And our motto is that we're a useful resource for building anything from rockets to robots to rocking chairs. One of our members is the head technician in the chemistry department on campus, who is Candace Wall. Candace came to us in about late 2018, and because of a problem that they were starting to see in their department, their seniors were getting through their program in the chemistry department, and they knew their chemistry, they knew how to work in a lab setting, but if they needed to make a jig for something, for example, they just needed to screw a couple 2x4s together to just hold something in place. Their students really did not know what to do. That was just a skill some of them had it growing up. Some of them remembered a little bit from their shop classes, but by and large, there were a fair number of people that you hand them a hammer and they don't know which end they're supposed to hit stuff with. So at that time, you think, well, it's Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech's a great engineering school. There's all this stuff on campus, all these people making stuff. And that's true. There are a lot of makerspaces and other labs on campus. And here's a pictures of some of them here. But like everything at Virginia Tech, the resources tend to be very siloed. If you are an engineering student working on an undergraduate design competition, you get to work in this room. If you are an undergrad who lives in this dorm building, you get this cool makerspace in your dorm building. Then same goes for this building. And if you're a graduate student and you have from one of two or so advisors, you get to work in this room. This room is across the street from the building where all the chemistry students are. There's clearly no problem with physical access, but if you're not in one of these groups that's assigned to one of these makerspace-like environments, you have no access. And these are all for students in the College of Engineering. Even being in the College of Science, you get one resource you're allowed to use. The Virginia Tech Library has 3D printing that everyone can use. And I mean everyone. I think you only just have to be a resident of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So there's, for certain groups, not even small groups, you kind of don't have very much on campus, which is where we come in. Hacksbug is an independent 501c3 nonprofit, and we'll take anyone. So with that, we worked with the chemistry department to come up with a plan for what we do with them. So we divided all the students into 6 groups. So for these students, this is an actual course that they take on campus as part of their degree. We take the students when they get over to our space. We have 4 classes we give them, a part 1, part 2 of a woodworking class. There's a laser cutting class using our laser cutter and a basics of metalworking. And these classes are really short. We have to fit them into a normal coursework kind of 1-hour block. And the focus of these that everyone took were on safety. Just so by the time they got through all 4 of these, they were not dangerous in the shop. We could let them show up and it would be okay, because part of the way the course worked was all of these students had full Hacksbug memberships for the entire semester. They could work on whatever they wanted during that time. And they could attend any of our classes that we normally offer. And since this number of people who came in represented a significant chunk of our membership, we're not a very large makerspace, we would, to some degree, tailor our class schedule for what students were interested in. If they really wanted detail on the laser cutter, we'd run a laser cutter class in our normal schedule. If we had a lot of people who wanted to do CNC metalworking, for example, we'd run a CNC mill class. And after the students ran through all these classes, there was departmental funding on the course side of things to get those students funding for small group projects, different groups in the class groups. They could form their own. And then at the end of the semester, they had to show off their project. They had to have something. So what did some of those projects end up looking like? So from woodworking 1 and 2, every student made one of these wooden boxes. So they at least had a place to stick all their stuff from the class. And boxes are great, and it shows that you really made something. As you imagine, for the chemistry department, we had some students make this nice laser cut out big periodic table. We have whatever this nunchuck bear head thing is. And we had a group that built a small trebuchet. So I say small trebuchet. In undergrad, I work with people who built like a 2,000-pound counterweight trebuchet. So this is small for me, but it really worked. You can see here, it threw the test article about, I don't know, 50, 75 feet. We went out on campus. It was a nice day. These are students who had not, to my knowledge, had not previously done woodworking projects. I'm sure they've thought about making trebuchets and maybe made one out of cardboard, but my knowledge of the background of the students is that they had not done any of this before. So now you've got chemistry students who can go out into the workforce, and if they have to throw something together, if they have to work on their house when they buy a house, they've got some foundation of that, and they learned it in a really fun way that is not just sitting in a classroom taking notes. The number of students we had in this program, the first year we did it, the spring semester for 2019, we had 18 students, which was great. We got to the end of that year, and on the university side of things, that was a bit too many students for them. We could handle it in our space. So the following year, they set the course cap on the course to be 10 students. So we had all 10 students. We got more time with each student in our introductory classes, and we finished the introductory classes, then got COVID. And then they were released from their class obligations that semester. We at least got I'm happy with this number of students we got. I believe the department is on track to making this course required as a sophomore year course in the chemistry department. But when we took it, it was all years. When we offered it, it was all years of students taking it. There was plenty of seniors in the class. We somehow got seniors to actually pay attention to a class in their spring semester. So future expansion for this class is going to be, the idea is to offer it both semesters so that we can take 20 some odd students a year, but split them across 2 semesters. Hacksbug has more capacity to take on more departments in this effort. And given that this is a problem that essentially any department in the College of Science is going to see, whether you're in physics or in physics, geosciences, or something like that, you have many of these same kind of problems. So we're going to start, once the world goes a little bit more back to normal, we're going to start reaching out to those other departments to see if we can do something similar for them. And potentially also, we've got Radford University 20 minutes away. We may speak to them as well. So that's what we've been doing over here in our corner of the state. I will take chat questions at the end.
Thanks, Max. I appreciate that. Yeah, very interesting to see a makerspace who's kind of outside of the university, partnering with the university. I know that there are a lot of makerspaces that are a part of a university or founded within a university. And so it's interesting to see that interaction play out in a really meaningful way. So very cool. Yeah, great job. All right, I will stall until I can bring up the next introduction. Okay, now I'm ready. So our next speaker is Nick Swayne from my area in the Shenandoah Valley. Nick is the founding director of JMU's X Labs. X Labs is a program and a model of education that challenges students to collaborate with industry professionals and peers from different majors, iterate ideas, and welcome meaningful failure to solve real problems. This space is free to access for all JMU students, faculty, and staff. All right, well, Nick, I've had the pleasure of speaking with you multiple times, and so I'm excited that you're here. I will turn it over to you to tell us about X Labs.
Okay, so hopefully everything's working and you can hear me and see me. And so this is a virtual background of our lab. We were doing a program on glass blowing. So that's, we do all kinds of crazy projects, which is sometimes famous and sometimes infamous for us. So this is a picture of JMU X Labs from the outside. It's the old public TV station right next to Newman Lake. the building is called Lakeview Hall, and you might understand why. Great view of the lake. Those are not our windows. We're in the, so there's the lake view, there's the street view, and then there's our area in the middle of the building, which is the no view. And so that's what we have, but it's a great space. The picture there to the right is of students in our space. I can't tell if you, I guess the participants, let me move that over. Okay, so right, let's see. So this is a map. I've created this, I guess about 1.5 years ago, and it has adapted many times since then. And so people ask, what do you do at X Labs? And we do all of this. How did we get started? We kind of started on the upper end of things, kind of in the complex problems, working on a drone project, which has kind of taken off a bit, no pun intended. And then we worked our way in both directions. So we come up with a this challenge of complex, which is different than I think that traditional makerspace. I want to point that out. Traditional makerspaces don't have classes in them. Now there may be like safety classes and things like that, but at most universities, if you have a makerspace, it is not normally a place where you schedule classes. And that's true. We've made trips to Georgia Tech and other places, and that's kind of their rule. So that's why we call ourselves an innovation space, because we are really focused on problem solving, and doing that through classes is our signature effort. And so as we started having these classes on complex problems where we're asking people to make prototypes, laser cut things, design and build prototypes and minimum viable products, we bumped into this where are they going to do their homework kind of challenge. And so then we said, okay, well, we're going to have open lab. So we created open lab. Then it was not being fully utilized. So we created pop-up classes, which are informal, not for credit courses like laser cutting, vinyl cutting, to get students in to learn how to use the systems that we had and build some traction there. And those have taken off. And then subsequent to that, we said, well, we need to have some other kinds of events that and programming that brings in what we noticed was that there were very few female students. 65% of the JMU population is female, and probably 10% at the time of our participants were female. So we started having events that were geared primarily towards bringing in female students and letting them know that they were welcome, that they, this was a place where they could work and do interesting things. And then in the course of all this, we came up with these challenges of design, something that's important to most universities, assessment. What if you're looking at the whole diamond, that's one form of assessment. If you're looking at like an end of course critique, that's another kind of assessment. So we do both. And then same thing with research. There's research about how this impacts the entire institution, but also research on how this changes courses, how it changes course design, and so forth. So we're now doing all of that. In fact, I'm in the middle of a workshop right now where we're building curriculum for faculty to teach faculty how to come into the lab and teach. So this is our kind of our ongoing work on the innovation ecosystem. I guess in the middle of that, we came up with, we needed to teach some classes on creativity and critical thinking. And then we moved into some things I'll get into later, wicked problems and what that means. So here's some examples. And again, we do some really non-standard maker. They're not things that you would think about in a makerspace. Solutions. One of our projects we had was working with NATO to come up with some innovative solutions for their decision-making process. And what we're trying to do in these is bring the students in, and this is kind of a fundamental thing with how we're different than entrepreneurship. And I guess I'll take a break and just talk about that for a second. and I noticed that there are several university-based programs. I just went through all your LinkedIn as you guys were up there. So I went through all your LinkedIn sites, and some of you are based in universities. And what I observed in looking at our Center for Entrepreneurship and working with many of those students is we invite students to come in and be entrepreneurs, like, get a minor in entrepreneurship, participate in the Center for Entrepreneurship. We bring them in. We had a society of entrepreneurs. We bring them in and you ask them, well, what do you want to do? Well, I want to be an entrepreneur. Okay, well, what do you actually want to do? Well, I want to be an entrepreneur. And when you dig into that, what that really translates to is I want to get rich, right? Like that's it. I want to be, because they hear about these entrepreneurial guys that go out there, kind of the unicorns, and solve major problems and make money on it. And so that's what they want, but they haven't settled, they haven't identified, they haven't learned how to identify a problem to solve that really matters. And so when they're given an assignment in a unstructured Center for Entrepreneurship, go find something and create a solution and let's see your business plan. And so what do students come up with? I mean, what would you come up with is back when you're 18 to 22 years old? That's what they come up with. Dating applications, music applications, parking applications, those things that are meaningful to them. And quite frankly, a fairly flooded market. And most of those apps that they create, no one pays for. You pay for the marketing. And so breaking into that market is really, really challenging. And so most of them end up, they pitch it, it sounds good. That makes this classroom happy, but it doesn't actually turn them into entrepreneurs, and they haven't solved a problem that anybody cares about. So our focus has been from the beginning on identifying, curating problems that are complicated enough that they haven't been solved, they're not easy to solve, and they require multiple disciplines coming together to solve them. So that's what you find here. What does that get us from the institutional perspective? Because I think it's very important to think about the institutional payback. And those of you, I saw a lot of Lynchburg College folks on there on the call. When you start appearing in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, which is, for those of you who are not in higher ed, that's like being on the cover of Time magazine. So there we are on the cover of the Chronicle. We're in the New York, featured in the New York Times. I think you can probably see this. From Novolab, anybody recognize Fred Briggs there from Novolab? So we partner and connect all of these people and create opportunities. And from an institutional perspective, this elevates the institution by getting you recognition for doing something different. And I think that's, people have talked about having, I think your keynote today, Ilana, talked about, doing things different and not being the cookie cutter makerspace. Well, we're definitely not a cookie cutter makerspace. What got us in the Chronicle of Higher Education was a program that we do called, we were going to call it Hacking for Community, and everybody got crazy about us hacking the community. So we call it Community Innovations. It's the same thing. So we use lean startup, design thinking, and the agile process to identify and solve problems in our community. This one being homelessness was one of the ones we were working on. So gets a lot of attention. Some of the more traditional aspects, these students working drone. This was our first drone class and the first night of our first drone class, and then hosting events where we bring the community students in and explain to people what we're doing. So we don't want to be a silo. We don't want to have silos. We want the community to come in and engage with the students to see what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why it's important. And so that the drone project was kind of what launched us, but we've grown to about 20 different courses that we offer now. So again, our signature characteristic is to focus on these complex dynamic problems. All of our courses are team taught by what we call 3 non-adjacent disciplines. For the non-educators, discipline is how they kind of refer to a major. So majors that are not necessarily adjacent. So political science and public administration are adjacent disciplines. But for our autonomous vehicle, we had computer science, engineering, and philosophy. So those are non-adjacent disciplines. And you can ask me why we would have philosophy in there, and I can talk about that later. But getting these non-adjacent disciplines, because they see things different, they have a different approach to problem solving. What they identify as the problem is different. You can imagine that an engineer building an autonomous car looks at the problem differently than a computer science person who's looking at the same autonomous vehicle, but sees the problem completely differently. And so the friction and tension that comes from those differences is kind of where we think the magic happens in this. So, these are the courses that we teach for those of you who are academics. All of these courses are usually taught as independent studies or topics course. And the students and faculty all come together, meet at the same time and place. We work all this out ahead of time, and that's how we implement them. Almost always have industry or agency partners, and we work towards a prototype or a solution, as opposed to a course that might be on statics and dynamics, or a programming class on C++ or data structures or something like that. Our courses are titled based on the problem. So hacking for defense, hacking for diplomacy, robotic process automation, autonomous vehicles. So that's how we identify our courses. The actual courses, you won't find any of those in the course catalog. You'll find independent study in physics, independent study in computer science, and we recruit those faculty and students to come into the class and participate. Again, we use lean startup design thinking and agile processes. So we're teaching people processes of innovation that are life skills, kind of those 21st century skills that are substantive in nature. We maintain a pretty significant public presence, social media, web partners, and we have a pretty extensive annual report that goes out. Looks kind of like a magazine, but is our annual report. And one of the things that we do is demonstrate the power of a liberal arts education to solve problems. To give you some examples, this is a year or so old, but the partners that we have that participate with us are partners that up until we started working with them had never established any kind of presence or partnership with James Madison University in a big way. I mean, sometimes you have little projects, or you get a small grant from a defense agency, but these guys are ongoing partners where we have somebody at the C level or equivalent that maintain a relationship with us, which is pretty nice. Again, we focus on this problem-solving loop and how that affects our education and the learning of the students, which is really our intent. Regardless of whether you're doing a project on human trafficking or autonomous vehicle, we want people to have an experience, reflect on that, abstract what they learn, and then put it into action. So that cold learning model or the OODA loop, whatever you prefer, are core factors in what we do. And then we've got a bunch of courses in development, hacking for finance. I keep getting calls from these guys on Wall Street that want us to work with them to do some interesting things. The Smithsonian wanted us to work with them on how they might develop a concept for the Smithsonian of the future, these adaptive learning models. And just recently we started down the road on esports. So yeah, so that's it. I will stop sharing, and I guess I'll take questions in the should I take questions now, or should I wait on those? What's the?
Well, good question. Actually, you were our final speaker, and so we are open to questions now. So Jean, do you want to go through some of the questions that appeared in the chat?
Yes, I'm going to actually just ask people to unmute themselves. And Ryan, you were the first. You had a question earlier leave for Trish.
Good thing I wrote it down.
Let me go back and get it for you. Hold on.
There was a lot of great conversation in the chat. You're making me scroll really far. So
No,
thank
I'm
you all so
scrolling. I'm
much.
scrolling. It was great conversation, and thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I think my first question was actually for John, and it was around creating that shared language and communicating with economic developers around what a makerspace is, particularly in a rural area. You know, we at Valley Makers, we started down this path, 5 years ago, and there was a lot of education involved around what in the heck is a makerspace, and how is this even like valuable to the city or the region as a whole? What benefit does this bring? And there was a lot of we had to learn some of the jargon of economic development so that we could communicate. And maybe this falls both for John and for Alicia, but do you have any guidance on how to bridge that gap quickly, efficiently? How do you talk to economic developers when you're approaching them for the first time, especially with something that maybe they aren't familiar with? And even to Alana's point, some of the policy changes around micro manufacturing in Main Street, that's going to take probably city council or your supervisors to vote on something, right? And so how do you start that conversation where some folks may not be familiar with what a makerspace is?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that ties into so much of economic development in general. And I think it's really about speaking their language and kind of playing a little bit, playing on their terms a little bit in terms of the political decision makers. And I think that takes on a couple of forms. It takes on whether it's prior policy decisions that have been made, or certain language that certain decision makers kind of need for themselves to be interested, or for their constituency to be interested. How can you kind of use the words, and help inform then what, if there's certain words that need to be used or certain things that need to be considered, how do you kind of align the need and kind of other objectives and community partners kind of within that mold. And then I think another thing is that there's certain things that speak almost everywhere in terms of decision makers, and job creation and local economic support is huge. And so we, in so much of our work and stuff we've done with makerspaces and this particular project with DEMPED in DC, there was a economic impact component to it. It was really kind of top level, broad strokes. That's something that we do a lot of, using different modeling software of, if you can increase, certain industries by a certain amount, here's how much job creation there is. Here's how that impacts the local economy in terms of indirect and induced economic impact. Here's how this impacts fiscal coffers in terms of not only money spent, but if you can show return on investment for a municipality or a county or a state, that speaks volumes. And if there's multiple proposals to, again, the city council, anybody who gets to control purse strings, and one of them gets to show a positive return on investment, and here's the additional tax revenues generated back in, that's really powerful stuff. So that's how we often kind of try to pull the strings or gain the interest by saying, hey, here's how many jobs we think we can help support or create, and here's how this impacts the community fiscally and economically.
And if I could add to that, I think even before you do that, potentially, because yeah, that's all 100% accurate, invite them over to come see it and say, in some ways play to their ego a little bit and say, hey, what do you think? What would you like to see? How do you think this could be utilized in our community? Because I think being able to physically and tangibly see things and touch things helps stir those conversations a little more organically too.
Yeah, excellent.
And Dorothy, I believe you had a question for John.
Yeah, I can go ahead. I see there's a lot of questions and I'd much rather give them to other folks. I can always follow up with John and Alicia and all the incredible speakers. So look forward to an email from me because I would love to talk to you more. I have all these, lots of questions, so, but I don't want to take up everything. I'd rather give it to our other guests.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So Ryan, you had a question, I think, for Alicia, but perhaps not, because you indicated you thought it was for John.
Yeah, I think, well, I was also curious. I can defer as well.
Defer it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Then in that case, Joel, you had a question you asked earlier. And
Yeah, hello, everybody. I'm just curious to know what else can we do? We see the maker impact. We see the economic energy it creates. What more can we do to introduce more to this process that wouldn't normally hear about it? I went to a park this weekend and met the most wonderful kids, and it's just so much fun it was like a COVID medicine pill to see the energy and excitement of these kids taking on a maker project and learning how to use tools they never would have thought about. So, and opening up ideas on other career paths other than athletics and the traditional things that they hear about in school. What more can we do as a group to showcase this and get more involved? And I'll let anybody take that.
That's what we're all here for. Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that building these connections is part of it, right? I think that for a lot of makerspace organizers, we have a space, we've created this community, and that's sort of step one, right? Is a community and a physical space. And then once you can support yourself and be established in that way, then it's how can you reach out to the community? And I think that's where these partnerships come in. When Alicia talked about our program, you know, those wraparound services, childcare and transportation, we know, we've tried. I have picked up students on my, you know, to bring them to class, and that's not sustainable. We need partners to be able to do that in a real way. So my hope is that by working with other organizations and moving outside the walls of your makerspace and into the universities or into the city and into, you know, different organizations that can help bring the audience, because you know it is a job to run a makerspace, right? That there and keeping track of what's happening inside those walls is a lot. And so I think it's important that we find others to lean on and to help bring in different audiences than we would organically just walk through the door, you know.
I was going to say relationships. It all boils down to that. I mean, it doesn't matter how big or small your city is. You know, we've seen that this last year with COVID. We did a lot of business recovery grants and programs, and we have had the most interaction with our business community, I think, than we've ever had, because they needed some interaction because they needed some help. But we've also been able to form relationships there, which then leads into those next conversations. You know, well, how is workforce development going? Where are your pinch points? How can we help you there? You know, so it's a lot of persistence and patience, but building those relationships is definitely vital.
And then Trish, I believe you have a question around student retention and participation. I think that's for Nick.
Yeah, for both the JMU and the Virginia Tech makerspaces. I know that Virginia Tech one is not operated directly through Virginia Tech, but you still work with a lot of students. And just one question that's getting at, if they're just there for one semester, like 3 to 4 months of time, you know, there's a lot of safety trainings and everything to go through. So I was just wondering, does the student continue their use of the makerspace much longer after their semester credit for course or their semester course?
Yes. So what happens is I think for us in all of our, from the formal courses that we offer to the events and the pop-up classes, yeah, our students come in, and when they, you know, I've seen some of Joel's work as well. When they see what they can do, I mean, most of the many kids today coming to college have never cut wood, drilled metal, welded, soldered, none of that. And so when they can come in and see that, wow, I really can put two boards together, right? Without, and we're pretty, we push it to them really quickly. Our safety classes are not the traditional like step. I mean, we teach people how to operate a tool safely without making it a semester long grind that prevents them from coming in the door. I mean, I think back to my, you know, I took shop when I was in middle school. I think it was probably the first time. And this, like, good grief, we spent the first 3 weeks doing safety stuff to learn how to use a hand drill. And so like I never took the class again. I didn't want to, like, really, like I use a skill saw at home and without my dad looking at me, and here I got to use a hand, you know, I have to have a safety class to learn how to use a drill, and then I have to have an adult there watching me while I use it. And there are some universities that have that even on our campus. There are some departments that still impose that kind of oversight. And so what does that teach? I mean, we have kids that are going to graduate from college and go be supervising engineers in the field that we don't allow to use a hand tool on their own. And so we assume a bit of risk, but there's also people take on a lot more responsibility in that regard. So yeah, we see people come back. In fact, one of our events was triggered for girls, was for young women, our Fab Lab, we call it. That we had 250 young women show up. And the next day there were 4 young ladies back in the lab I'd never seen before. And I said, you know, hey, how did you find out? Well, we were at the Fab Lab last night, and we told our boyfriends about it, and they said there's no way they're going to let you in, that they were lying to you. And so we came just to prove they were, you know, taking selfies and FaceTiming with their boyfriends to show their boyfriends that, yeah, we're here, we're welcome. They're giving us stuff. They're letting us use the tools on the first day, you know, and they kept coming back. So there was one of the young ladies that was like, every day I went back there, she was back there. She was a Spanish major. So she was not in any technical degree, but she found her spot and came back. She learned how to do laser cutting, vinyl cutting, you name it. She came in and she wanted to learn everything. And so, yeah, once you empower them and make it so that it's not painful, they come in and they keep coming back.
That's excellent. Yeah, and I think that each one of us as Makerspace organizers has a story or multiple stories like that, where someone has just, you know, you can see their eyes light up, and they just become inspired, and they become just so passionate about making and creating whatever it is that they're working on. Jean, any other questions from the chat?
We are good to move to final comments, and I'd appreciate if folks can stay on for just a few more minutes. I know we're technically at time, but we very much want to give Dorothy an opportunity for some closing comments.
Yeah, now it's my honor to introduce Dr. Dorothy Jones Davis. She's our fearless leader and director at Nation of Makers. And Nation of Makers exists to support the full range of organizations that impact makers by encouraging connections, broadly sharing resources, facilitating funding opportunities, engaging in policy development, and advocating for the maker movement. They help maker organizations amplify the passion, innovation, creativity, and diversity of the maker community to maximize both local and global impact. Take it away, Dorothy.
Okay, thank you guys. So first I want to thank our speakers, to Alana, John, Alicia, Max, and Nick, I just want to thank you for some really wonderful presentations. And then I also want to take a second and thank Elise, Ryan, and Jean, because if you don't know them, which I think everyone on this call obviously knows them, they're the most, some of the most passionate people I know about the maker movement and just in supporting Nation of Makers in its work. And you may or may not know this, like our state representative program, which is part of what they're part of, why you got an email from Nation of Makers Virginia, is new and it's evolving constantly. And they've always been, sort of at the forefront of that, pushing us forward within the state of Virginia to make sure that the maker movement is in the minds of all of you that are working within cities and towns across Virginia to make Virginia an even better state than it already is. So I just want to thank them, very quickly, just to say, I really appreciate their efforts, not just today, but all throughout. And I really look forward to scaling these days of action, because I think it's a great opportunity for us to have these conversations. And this is one thing that Nation of Makers really tries to do, is this idea of like, what does it look like to have a community convening or town hall that brings together different stakeholder groups to talk about what that impact is. And so many of you are doing that in such a meaningful way. So I'm just so grateful for you. I just want to leave you with, just some calls to action. This is the National Week of Making. And, people ask, well, what is the National Week of Making? Well, really, it's just our opportunity to stand on a soapbox and talk about how amazing the maker movement is. And you guys really did that. So we can totally see what's going on across Virginia. And you haven't even covered, I think, even a fraction. I know there's so much more going on, but I'm appreciative for the glimpse into the amazing state of Virginia and just all that your different spaces and organizations are doing to, continue again to expand opportunities with whether it's in entrepreneurship or manufacturing or business development, economic development, job creation, education, you name it. You're really making Virginia a great place to be and live. And for it, I think all of the citizens of Virginia and even the students of Virginia who may be just coming through for a short time before going back to their own states really benefit from it. So just really, really grateful for that. Just two calls for action. So I have, we're sort of two different stakeholder groups here. We have community leaders from economic development groups. Thank you guys for coming and talking with the makers. I think you guys already gave us some really wise advice, but if you haven't caught on to it, and for those of the folks that will be listening to this recording afterwards, if you're a community leader, we encourage you to get engaged with your local makerspace, plan a makerspace or a maker fair visit, reach out to your local maker organizations to discuss partnerships like you heard at this event. Also educate yourself. There's so much impact of the maker movement. There are really great reports, like the report that John presented. We just put out as Nation of Makers a report on the maker impact on COVID-19 around the PPE efforts called Design, Make, Protect. And I'll put the link into the chat, or maybe somebody else can for me. But really, the maker impact, if you're curious about it, makers over the course of a very short period of time between March and November of last year produced over 48 million pieces of PPE. And that's incredible when you think about, that's not large corporations that were doing that. These are individual makers, over 42,000 individuals. This is not just domestic, this was internationally. 86 countries were represented in the sample that we took in our survey. But this is an incredible impact on the world, right? And we can think about what makers do, and you want to talk about the economics of that. That was over $271 million worth of supplies manufactured. That's incredible. And much of it was donated and it was not funded in a large way. And so we really want to increase those partnerships, because we know that when makers put their mind to it, they can do incredible things. So I think you heard here that that's really the case. And so we're looking forward to more conversations between folks like, folks that work in different cities in economic development and job creation, in education, to really partner with your local maker spaces and maker organizations meaningfully. We also invite you, as I said, to join us on our policy working group. You don't have to come every week, but just if you want to pop by, just let me know. We would love your expertise, advice, and information around the best way to engage with offices like yours. Again, we would love to create that shared language. We also offer you an invitation to NomCon. So each year we have an annual convening of the maker community, the leadership of that maker community, Nation of Makers convening, NomCon for short. This year it will be virtual once again, so we'll be on Zoom, but we're really, really excited to host it June 23rd to 27th. You know, we would love to have you participate if you're interested in presenting. Even though the deadline has passed, we can certainly squeeze you in because this information is really, really important. And we would love to showcase the work that you're doing and how you've been partnering with maker organizations. So just let us know. And the website for that, thank you, Elise, is nomcon.org. So thank you. And then on the other side, just really quickly, my maker leaders, I think you're already doing an incredible job. Everybody on here, I know, and I know the work you're doing, so I'm very excited. But you know, again, just like the leaders said on the other side, don't be afraid. They're just humans. They all seem like lovely people, and I'm sure they would be happy to hear from you. So, you know, really think about reaching out to your local leaders and articulating your value to policymakers and also those economic leaders. One way you can do that, each year we run the annual survey of Makerspaces. We did not have it this past year because of COVID. We had to take a small break, but this year we will have it again. And so it's just an opportunity for us to collect that data that, you know, John was sort of talking about and Alicia was talking about in terms of, you know, what is the economic impact of a makerspace? And having that information in aggregate allows us as Nation of Makers and each one of us, you know, as we write grants collectively or individually, to be able to articulate that. I think that's the language, part of that language in talking to folks is to really be able to explain and express what the dollars are, right, on the other side of things. So anything that we can do to help with that, we're happy to. So one way you can do that is by participating. Also, you can also join our policy working group. That helps to give you some of the language. We'll be creating tools. We already are working on them over the next few months and years as we persist. But we certainly can use more folks on board to help us with that stuff. You know, per what Tracy said earlier, have a conversation with your local economic development authorities about the requirements for some of these grants. We know that it's scary. And you know, I have to say, I sometimes read the EDA stuff and are like, okay, I don't know where someone's gonna get $1 million match. But you know, the matches are not just dollars in explicit sense. They can be buildings, they can be other sorts of things. And so it's helpful to talk to folks to understand what the requirements are, and then also talk to them about what your restrictions are, like what's giving you heart palpitations and how can you work with them to change those. And then, you know, again, showcase what you're doing as much as you can. You know, really show off what you're doing. The Week of Making is a great opportunity to do that. If you post something, tag Week of Making, we will retweet you or repost you just to let everyone know how awesome you are. And again, you can also participate in NomCon and showcase there as well. But I just want to say thank you to all of you for participating in this. Again, this was sort of an experiment that the leadership of Nation of Makers Virginia, you know, came to me with and said, you know, do you think we could do this? Could we pull it off? And I said, let's try. And, you know, they sort of ran with it. And, you know, I'm just, again, so grateful for the state of Virginia and their leadership. So grateful for all of you and all the great work that's doing in Virginia. And I look forward to holding up Virginia as a great example of what the maker movement can do nationally across the United States. So thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you to each of you for making Virginia awesome.
Exactly.
Thanks so much, guys. This was great. I'll send a follow-up email later this week with the recording so you can share it with any of your coworkers or peers who missed it. We'll put it on the Nation of Makers YouTube channel. If you didn't get a chance to send us your shipping address, if you want a copy of Alana's book, I'll put that in an email. I'm just going to send you a bunch of follow-up stuff so we can stay connected. And if you want to keep having these conversations, that would be great. And we'd love to see more of you all. So thank you for being here.
We also do have a channel. If you want to join the Nation of Makers Slack community, there is a state channel for the state of Virginia as well. And that's another place where you're welcome to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, Jean, let's download the chat before we go.
Let's do that.
Hop out. I don't know how to do that.
I was looking for the option and I seem to recall doing it before, but not having a lot of luck finding it.